Can you remember the moment your dad met his sister after so long?
Oh, yes. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, dear. Yes.
There's lots of wailing.
Set me quite emotional now.
For 26 years, war, exile and the Iron Curtain kept one Polish family apart. Torn from his homeland and sent into Stalin's labour camp system, Aleksander Jablonski survived hunger, forced labour and a wartime journey through Russia, Iran and Italy before fighting at Monte Cassino. When the war ended, returning to communist Poland was impossible. He built a new life in Britain, but the family he had left behind remained painfully out of reach. Then, after more than a quarter of a century, came the chance to cross back behind the Iron Curtain. In this moving episode, his daughters tell the story of separation, survival and a reunion in Poland. It's also the story of the Polish community in Britain, the children who inherited its memories, and the enduring pull of a homeland that distance, politics and time could never entirely erase. I'm delighted to welcome Linda and Sue to our Cold War conversation.
The dad, obviously Polish and Mum English. Dad was born in eastern Poland. His mother died when he was 7 and his father in 1941. And Dad last saw his sister in Poland in 1940 until that return trip in 1966. And he was taken initially into the Russian army, and then we did have a photograph, but unfortunately that's disappeared, and eventually ended up with General Anders in the British Eighth Army. And Sue might like to add a bit more on the background.
Yeah, from what he told us, which really was very sketchy, wasn't it, Linda? We didn't talk a lot about those early times, but we know from other family members from visits and what my mum learned that he was out and about minding his own business, really, in the village where he lived called Wappy, which was very near to the Russian border. So they were very much at risk in that area anyway, and was just taken to, I think originally to Moscow, was it, Linda?
Yes, yeah.
And with other young males that were taken, were stripped of their identities, really, put in Russian clothing and were expected to fight or labour for the Russians. So he was in a labour camp for a while. And when they were liberated, he did the long walk, which ended up going through through the Ural Mountains and through, I think it was Iran or Uzbekistan. Finished up in Egypt and fighting in Egypt, and then was in Italy at Monte Cassino. So he did that whole sort of well-known General Anders journey really through the Second World War, and then initially landed in the UK in Glasgow was where he first landed. Then I think was moved to Wales before settling in Blackshmoor camp initially in Leek.
Yeah, interestingly, when he was arrested or taken over, it was the NKVD that later became the KGB, or they just closed the roads and they were arrested. And from what I do remember Dad saying is that he was allowed to go, and his sister gave him a jacket and some bread and
some shoes, I think, wasn't it? Shoes, and that was it.
And that was the last time he saw his family until 1966.
Wow. And what age was he when the Soviets invaded?
He was 20. Yeah, he was 20.
And did he have a job at that point? Was he working?
He worked in the butcher's shop, and it was a town that I can't pronounce, but I can't find it on a modern map anymore. And he was there for 5 years.
Because where his family lived, that he lived with, because he lived with his auntie, didn't he? His auntie raised him after his mum died. He had a cruel stepmother, didn't he, as well? But it was on the Belarusian border.
Yeah. And just going back to family history, it may be interesting to know that times are very difficult. And my dad's mum, my grandma, she died when Dad was only 7, and she died through having an illegal abortion because they couldn't afford any more children. So it was an exceptionally sad time that Dad then had a very bad time with his stepmother and then went to live with another auntie and uncle.
Yeah, tough times in those days. Did he talk much about his time in the labour camp?
The only thing I remember, which is when they went out trying to get food, really, to steal cabbages in the fields because there wasn't enough food, and all the fireflies were out, and they thought they were ghosts, didn't they? They thought they were spirits, and found out afterwards it was fireflies. But I do remember him saying that, and about having to line the boots with stuff to keep the feet warm, because they would go out into, I think if it was over, was it lower than minus 10 or 15, they couldn't go out and work, but up to that they had to go out and work, and they used to have to layer the boots with newspapers or cabbage leaves. They used cabbage leaves, didn't they, I think? And they used to dry the cabbage. So they would eat the cabbage, they would use them for insulation, and they would also dry and smoke the cabbage.
And he did talk about time on cattle trucks and being completely ridden with fleas from head to foot, but he didn't dwell on those things a great deal.
Not what we know must have been the awful things. He always tried to talk about the anecdotes and the things that got them through it. I think that was how he wanted it. It was, we did this to get through this, because they were stripped and heads shaved, weren't they? And good job they had to be stripped and whatever, because they were lice ridden, weren't they?
So the Germans invade the Soviet Union, and Stalin decides that he wants to release the Poles that they're holding to form one army that remains in the Soviet Union and one army that's in the West, which was Anders' army that you were talking about before. So did he talk about his journey from the camp to Iran and what that was like?
I don't remember specific detail. My mum might have remembered, but her memory's getting a bit sketchy about it all now, isn't it? But he did talk about how much time they had to spend on foot. They did so much by train, and then a lot where that was inaccessible, they had to march. So there was weeks and weeks of marching. But I think they were better prepared, looked after. They got decent shoes and a great coat and things. But again, he didn't give a great lot of detail, not to us anyway, did he?
No. Because the journey took them from Iraq, Iran, Palestine before Monte Cassino, and it was, as I say, it was when they joined the British Eighth Army that the treatment seemed to be much better. And I guess, as Sue said, we'd get little anecdotes, but he was always a very positive person.
Saw himself more as a survivor than a victim, really. I got through this, therefore, I'm okay, rather than this happened to me, how dreadful. He never voiced it in that way, did he?
I think to survive that, you've got to have a positive attitude, because there were hundreds of thousands that didn't make it through those marches.
He always remained right up until he died, really, didn't he? He was always physically strong, a strong man. He was only little,
but very strong.
Yeah, and continued to be a good butcher and a good cook.
And a good cook, yes.
Yeah.
So you could say he was as fit as a butcher's dog.
You could, yes, absolutely.
When he arrives in Italy, did he talk to you about his time in the army there and fighting the Germans in Italy?
Do you remember him telling us, Linda, about his sergeant next to him on the mount on Monte Cassino, who had all his insides blown? I remember that. That was the worst thing he told us. He said he saw him and his sergeant, I'm sure it was his sergeant,
was
holding his own insides in his arms on Monte Cassino. And he said that was the level of the brutality of it all, really. But he didn't talk about the horrific, the signalman, wasn't he? So
he was a signalman,
where
we've got photographs of him there, but they're generally where he's smiling in the sunshine and with the crowd.
He did meet he did meet Monty, didn't he? He said.
Yes, he did. Yes.
When he was in Egypt. Yeah, he had gold. Where was he? At Tel Aviv. He had lost some teeth because of the lack of nutrition and everything else, and he had gold teeth put in when he was in Tel Aviv. Not an essential part of the history, but one of the anecdotes, really.
These little details always just bring it a bit more to life. He sounds like an amazing personality.
He was.
And that strength of personality to make it through those, such difficult conditions there. So did he talk to you about hearing that the Germans surrendered or anything like that? Was there any other memories of his time during this period?
When they actually took Monte Cassino,
that was the major part.
Yeah, when it was taken, there's a lot of celebrations, wasn't there, at that time? I think that was the only thing, really, because they just wanted to get through it and get to the end of the war, really. Just wanted to get through it and get back to some sort of normality eventually. But so it was more about what happens next, I think, for my dad.
Because they were given choices of where to go, to Canada, to France, to America,
or back
to Poland, and that was a no-go area for Dad as far as he was concerned, that there was no life to go back to there. And
England closest.
England was the closest, and he said it was supposed to be the land of milk and honey, so they chose Scotland originally. They were shipped into Scotland.
He didn't want another long journey somewhere, did he? He wanted to get settled somewhere as close as possible.
And so how did he end up in Leek in Staffordshire? That is the land of milk and honey, Leek.
Absolutely.
You know, how did he end up there?
The Blackshire camp was originally set up for the American GIs, and of course they all went back. And so it was set up as one of the resettlement camps in the UK. And we were very clear near to Buxton, the quarries, which wanted labour. They wanted to take people on there. And so I think
he had to agree to taking whatever job they were given.
Whatever they were given, yes.
To have the benefits of the resettlement as it was then. But I think the infrastructure at Blackshire, I mean, it looked, when you talk about it now, it sounds pretty, well, more than rustic. But I think because the Americans had been there and they'd built, the buildings were done. So the infrastructure, some of it was really quite sound, wasn't it? So it wasn't too bad a place to be considering what had happened to them. But he did move, he came into Glasgow, and he said that the locals there, when they came in on the ships, they were all wanting him to go back from wherever Scottish, when they'd landed until being in Glasgow itself, they were taken there. Whichever port they came into, they were wanting them to go away, go back, even though they'd fought for the British. They weren't very welcome at first, were they? And then he was in Wales for a while, wasn't he?
Yes, yeah.
Then resettled in Blackshire.
In Blackshire, yes, yeah. When he worked at the quarries, which he didn't like, and I remember being little and he was complaining about the dust getting into his sandwiches and different things. And then Thomas Bolton's, the copper work people at Froghall, they took on many of the Poles, and that's where Dad went and where he stayed until he retired. The textile industry in Leek had a closed shop and wouldn't employ Poles, not to begin with. They didn't employ any of the Polish resettled ex-army people.
A lot of discrimination.
Yeah. There was discrimination for housing.
They were encouraged, the Poles, which is why a lot of Polish people haven't still got their Polish names, because they were encouraged to change the names because they'd stand a better chance of getting jobs and housing if they hadn't got a Polish name. But my dad said no.
It was Mum, really, because the nearest we could come to our name was Jablonska, was James, and my mum's name's Jessie, so she said no way to that. And eventually Dad is naturalised British, which he always said he'd paid quite a lot of money for the honour of swearing his allegiance to the royalty, and he did have to pay quite a lot for it. But all that was supposed to help in getting accommodation, housing, and I think before they did get housing, Sue was a little baby and I was about 7 before they got their own house, a council house.
Wow. And through your childhood, you knew about your Polish identity. I can imagine your father would have been making sure you didn't lose that.
Oh, we did, because in Leek there was a Polish club, long demolished now, beautiful old building, and a lot of the Poles used to go there. It was quite renowned for some Polish party type carry-ons.
Gambling.
We've got some photograph gambling.
And, Dad would come back with a random watch or without a shirt now and again.
Or somebody's scarf, somebody's coat, and whatever. And we've got other Polish relatives in the family as well. My mum's sister was married to a Pole as well. So we were pretty used to sitting and listening to them chat. But unfortunately, we don't speak
never
Polish.
taught us the language. My dad wanted to become anglicised, although he got his cluster of those. They stayed a cluster of Polish friends until they all
until death. Yeah.
But after my dad had died, we still stayed. Mum and ourselves still stayed friends with those Polish friends, and that was never lost, was it? But other than that, he wanted to be as English as he could be, and he always said, "This country When he died, Mum said, did he want to go back to Poland, his body take it back? I said, no, this country's been good to me. And he's lived here longer than he ever lived in Poland. So he was grateful for everything that he'd ever had.
Absolutely.
Was there much contact with the family still in Poland whilst he was in the UK?
There was a long-term contact with one of Dad's sisters. The letters went to and fro, and we used to gather clothes and all kinds of things together and send parcels. He sent parcels on a regular basis to a company called PKO. And he sent wedding dresses, didn't he?
Yeah.
For two members of the family.
Yeah.
He sent wedding dresses. There was always something being saved, being collected. And he used to wrap the parcels beautifully and string all knotted in the right place and send all kinds of things over to the family over there. And regularly had letters with his sister. And he didn't know what had happened to one brother until we went back in 1966. And we discovered he'd been shot for helping Jews to escape. He'd been shot by a friend. And his dad didn't know that until then, until 66.
Wow. So the sister he was in contact with, was that the sister who gave him the coat?
That would have been Yanka, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yanka, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So once he was naturalised as British, is it that when he considered it would be safe enough to him to actually go to Poland to visit the relatives?
There was that, and there was financially as well, which fortunes changed, shall we say, in 1965, wasn't it? When he won what was then a substantial amount of money on the football pools. I'm not sure what it would be worth now.
It was £6,052.76.
Yeah.
He won.
Yeah, he won on the pool.
And that was the turning point for going back to Poland.
Yeah. We can now afford to go because we went for a month, didn't we?
Yeah.
So we could afford to go and get whatever the family, buy things for the family, take things with us, etc., etc. So it was all very exciting.
So can you remember the discussion of the planning for that visit? It must have been very exciting for you, or a bit scary for you to go and meet.
It was. I put it in context. I was 17. Sue was 10.
Yeah.
So quite different. Completely different aspect to what was happening.
I had to have a new coat and new dresses, and that was like, for me, it's like we're going to this place.
I remember Mum having all the maps, no sat-nav, of course, and we were driving from Leek to Warsaw. I remember Mum had got all the maps and planning everything and writing everything down, and then it was where we were going to stop to eat, where we were going to get petrol,
overnight stop,
stop, a ferry. That was really exciting.
Yeah. When we crossed the borders going into Poland, you'd come to the West Germany, to East Germany. There were like 4 sets of guards because you got Americans, British, you'd still got Russians and Germans. Going across there, we'd stayed in a place called Helmstad, hadn't we? This lovely, it was almost like an Austrian type village.
It was very much Austrian, yes.
That type of village where we slept under duvets. First time we ever slept under a duvet.
Oh, yeah.
First time we'd ever seen a duvet was in West Germany. And all the guards, they were in everything. They were in your back of your car, in your bags. They got mirrors underneath. And my dad had got things that probably shouldn't have been hidden under the carpets in the back of the car. It got money and stuff that he'd hidden, $90 and whatever.
Yeah.
And they were like patting down all inside the car, and we were all sort of sweating, thinking they're going to find this stuff. They didn't, fortunately. But I think that was the most anxiety provoking, was all those guards with guns, and you were made to feel like a criminal, even though you were, because I suppose in those days, tourists travelling by car wasn't very popular, especially coming from Britain, perhaps, because we travelled with another family as well, didn't we?
Yes, yeah. That was it, the questions of why you were going.
Yeah, why, when. That was the first real anxiety-provoking bit, whether you were 10 or 70. I remember that.
Because one car was completely stripped down, if I remember.
There was nothing. Yeah.
They got it completely stripped out, and we thought,
my mum was in a bit of a state. We got through. I went back with them in 1971 and had a similar experience then. turfing all your blinking clothes out. I was just cursing in English at the time, but East Germany. So we had to stop on the west-east border because you could only have a transit visa to go through East Germany. You got to do it in a day. You weren't allowed to stop. So to be planned in, didn't it?
Yeah, because that's one of the photographs that we've got is taken on the border there. Mm. Yes, it was a thrilling time, an exciting time. When we got into Warsaw, it was very different, particularly from my point of view as 17, and you're going to stay somewhere where there's no bathroom. The toilet wouldn't flush.
Silverfish running all over the floor.
Silverfish everywhere. Dad, first thing Dad did was pay for a plumber to come, and we were all sleeping in one apartment. But it was an eye-opener in many ways.
The whole of the building, in fact, we can still get it on Google Earth, can't we? The whole of the building was shot through with bullet holes, and it was in a very rough area of Warsaw, wasn't it?
When we got into Warsaw very late at night and had no idea where Old Brudnowska was, the street that we needed to go to, so Dad waylaid a taxi and said, if I follow you to this street, I'll pay you whatever. I'll pay you in dollars. I think he persuaded him with dollars. And the taxi driver apparently turned around and said,
are you sure?
Well, are you sure you want to go there? It's the worst street in Warsaw. And that was where we ended up. And in the end, Dad was speaking to his sister in English and us in Polish, and excitement overflowed up and down the stairs, and it was just incredible.
This thundering down the stairs when they realised we'd arrived.
Yeah.
On all these feet, because everybody lived in this one apartment. It was all going on, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was just amazing.
Dark. I haven't got a clue. And they asked where my mum was.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Because my mum was very young when they married, and they thought it was another daughter. They didn't know my mum was his wife because she was 13 years younger. So it's like, where's your wife?
And one of our cousins actually slept in Dad's car, didn't he?
Yes.
To keep it safe, to keep the car safe on the road. He slept in it every night.
Wow.
So it was.
Wow. At that moment, can you remember the moment your dad met his sister after so long?
Oh, yes. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, dear. Yes.
Lots of wailing.
Set me quite emotional now because although they've been apart for so long, they were very much alike.
Oh, crap.
And the chat just went on, and different people came and went and came and went. But just where I remember one of the discussions one night, my auntie went around the table going, shh, 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 and then she closed all the windows, and she said, if you're going to speak about the government, we need to be very quiet. We don't know who's listening, because obviously it's communist times. And these kind of things just were it's quite a revelation when you haven't lived through those times.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So was his family not particularly well off then?
Not well off at all.
No. Everything. No. They had the basics, and they had the basic of the basics. Because unbeknown to us, an American cousin of my dad's who'd ended up being settled in America, he'd arrived the day before, and he was, that man could snore. Never heard anything like it in my life. But he'd arrived, and he bought them. They hadn't got a fridge, had they? And he bought all singing, all dancing fridge, and you can't describe they kept looking at it and opening it and putting things in and taking things out. I can remember that fridge. Yeah.
And just getting up in the morning, my auntie slept in the kitchen with her head on the kitchen table.
On toilet rolls.
On toilet rolls in the kitchen table. Then in the morning, Sue and myself would be put into the kitchen with 2 bowls of water, and one was the bowl to do from the head to the middle, and the other was the bowl to do from the bottom back up to the middle, because there wasn't a bathroom there. But all of that was done very, everywhere immaculate. The food just kept coming out.
Again, basic, but lots of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because there's one thing if the Poles have got to do is feed you. And then it was the things like every time we moved anywhere, fingerprinted, having your fingerprints taken. Sue and myself going around to explore in one of the gardens around one of the old buildings, and then you're faced with a gun in your face.
Yeah, and
armed guards.
You would now see as like a public park.
Yes,
but they were everywhere, weren't they? We did actually have 2 baths in the month because my dad paid the lady upstairs in the apartment with the bath.
And she also paid to watch the World Cup.
Watch the World Cup, yeah. 1966 World Cup.
Yeah.
We paid to watch that upstairs as well.
But there were some very sad times, as Dad sat with everybody all around the table in the apartment and learnt more about what had happened to, he had a brother who was an alcoholic, the brother who was
younger
killed.
Tom, he was shot, wasn't he?
He was shot, yes.
Yeah.
And then we went to visit another auntie, and Dad was so shocked when he saw where she lived that he hit the curb with the car and ripped the tyre.
The tyre.
Because she lived in a wooden hut that was padded out with brown paper. And she sat in the middle of the garden with her legs crossed, a headscarf on, peeling.
Got a little bench, hadn't she, outside?
Yeah. And it was, he realised how fortunate he was, really. I think that was another thing that he saw how tricky things were for his family. But he did a lot to help them.
Yeah. On the lighter side, you weren't very impressed because you were 17, I couldn't less. You had to go into the hen house in the morning with your bucket, and then you do whatever you needed to do with your bucket.
Oh, God, yeah.
Then you had to take your bucket down the bottom of the field and get rid of, there's like a big cesspit, wasn't there, down there, and then you would take your bucket back and wash it out and put it back in the hen house ready for the next ablution. So it always makes me smile. I just think it was hilarious. I say it isn't so funny when
not when you're 17,
you're a teenager, but when you're 10, it's can't wait to tell my friends about this one. So it was all very. We stayed in somebody's house, didn't we, just up the road in an apartment. But again, I remember us being warned there to be quiet, not to talk very much.
Not to talk.
So where was this? Because you were previously in Warsaw, so the aunt was somewhere else?
She was in Częstochowa.
No, it wasn't. It was Chehanów. She lived in Chehanów. The Black Madonna's in Częstochowa.
Yes, Chehanów.
And I think it was on the way, because Yorick was with us, wasn't he? Cousin was with us. It was on the same road out. It was further east than Warsaw. We stayed in Warsaw, and that was going east out to there, and then it was even further east when we went to Wappy.
And Warsaw in 1966, I'm presuming there was still a lot of war damage there, because it was almost completely destroyed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. They were doing an incredible job of what was being rebuilt, weren't they? But the street, like we said, the flats were just riddled with bullet holes, weren't they? In Budnowska, all that area was riddled.
And balconies falling down at the back. And I do remember the road. And we did go to the Palace of Culture, which is a horrible, they call it the Christmas cake in Poland, given to them.
Well, the Russians gifted it.
Gifted it.
They'd love to have gifted it back, I think.
It's just the most horrible dower. And where Yorick, Dad's cousin, lived, that was just blocks and blocks.
Grey buildings.
Grey buildings, faceless flats. The nicest part was the old town, Staromiasto, that had been rebuilt, or was being rebuilt. But we did see that at a later date when we went back again, when it was really lovely. And travelling on the trams and places you had to be careful. In fact, I think, was it Yola got her purse taken off, snatched from her when we were going somewhere on the tram? I think so, yes,
Your dad's car must have been a real curiosity in Poland.
Registration number BH562C. It was a red Volkswagen sedan. A lovely car.
Yeah, lovely car. That's the reason that Andrew slept in it, because he said otherwise it wasn't safe. The wheels would be gone. Yes, it was. And I do remember one day coming back, and one of my cousins, she'd obviously been trying some of my clothes on while I was out, and I think Dad had mentioned it, and Mum said something. I offered to give her a blouse, and she turned away, and she wouldn't have it.
Far too proud.
Far too proud. I can
buy my own clothes.
Yes.
We did leave. You did, but when we went in subsequent years, we used to leave no end of stuff, didn't we? Really, to leave things behind.
When we went, Dad had taken things in the car, hadn't he? Got things to sell, and for Yanka to sell.
Yeah.
Because jeans were something that everybody wanted at the time. Couldn't get them. But shopping was also very strange, because when you went for your bread in the morning, you queued up and paid for half a loaf, and then you went to another counter where they gave you the half a loaf. And then if you wanted to look at anything or try anything in the shop, it was all behind counters. You couldn't go in and just touch things
And
and pick them up.
browse.
You couldn't browse. You had to go in and say what you wanted. And there was jobs for everyone. If you went into a cafe or a restaurant, you had to take your coat off. You had to leave your coat. Somebody had
That
to
was later on as well when we went there,
take
wasn't
it from you. Yes.
Up until the 90s, that
right.
was.
Oh, yeah, because it was supposed to be that everybody had a job, but there certainly wasn't any money, particularly, well, in 66. And there were lots of shortages of different foods. So shopping and as Sue said before, the food was very filling but very basic.
Lots of potatoes and sausage.
And what did your mum make of it all? Because it's new, massively new to her. These are the new relatives.
Mum was 16 when she married Dad, and he was 13 years older. So she was only 17 when she had me. So from my memories, particularly when we all lived in an overcrowded council house, were that things were very tricky. I say Mum was very young, married to a Pole, which was like, that will never last. Had a baby, goodness, that's just far too young. But they back us through. There were some bad times. There were some, and obviously Dad has still got his Polish friends here, and that was one bone of contention, to disappear off to the Polish club and leave me with Mum, with Granny, and the household full of people. But she was always full of positive ways and of looking at things and doing things. But I do know that she took me as a baby one afternoon down to the Polish club, put me in my dad's arms and said, "She's your child as much as mine. I'll leave her here with you." And she left me there with him. There were some hard times. The language initially, Dad was working at Bolton's and having to learn the language, different cultures, and living overcrowded. No privacy. It was tricky for them. I know from different things that happened that Mum did find things difficult at times, but they worked through all of that. They worked through it all and came out. But as far as me and Sue were concerned, we had a great childhood. My friends used to come home for brownies and say, "Will you make your dad
talk?
Will you make your dad talk?" Because they wanted to listen to the accent.
Yeah, we were a bit of a novelty, weren't we, really?
Yes, yeah.
And your mother was welcomed into his larger family as well?
Oh,
yes.
Absolutely, yeah. They couldn't do enough. They did the best. They would say, I can clearly remember sitting around the table, they say to Dad, tell Mum, make sure that he was interpreting and telling her everything that was going on so she wasn't left out. She did understand some Polish, didn't she?
She did Polish. She did
Yeah.
Polish classes for a while. She went to Polish class for quite a while.
She understood quite a lot, but couldn't answer. So it was hard for Dad to keep interpreting, but the family weren't just going ahead talking to Dad. They were saying, tell Jessie, making sure that Mum doing it. But I would imagine if we asked her now, she'd probably say she was a bit like a rabbit in the headlights, really, because it was quite overwhelming, wasn't it?
Yes.
I think because there were so many of them and we got to meet them all and whatever. After a week or so, my memory, although I was only little, was things settling down into a bit more of a, really, of what we were doing.
There was a plan made of where we were going to go, we were going to visit, and we should see. Yes, yeah.
Because we did get time to go out and about and sightsee, and people took us out to see things and go places, didn't they? So it was a holiday as well as this sort of very emotional reunion, if you like. It still was a holiday as well.
And there were one or two members of the family, Irma and the guys in the choir.
Yeah.
They were quite well-to-do.
Yeah.
They were quite... that they took us out and bought things. They were a little bit better off side of the family. Lovely to meet our cousins, because Dad had told us about life in Poland, and at Christmas he used to always send presents over, to send a big parcel over, and it was great to actually meet them all.
How did you communicate with your cousins? As you don't speak Polish, I'm presuming they didn't speak English.
It seemed to matter, really, to me.
No, it didn't. No.
Yeah.
We just seemed to cope with some sign language. I was taken out by Andrew, who was a little bit older than me, the one who was going to be a vet or whatever. And he spoke a little bit of English, and they got a couple of friends, and one of them spoke a bit of English. And we just seemed to...
Got on, yeah.
Just get on, yes, yeah, just get on with it. They were great.
Yeah. They would try to make themselves understood, and I remember having... or they'd write things down or draw things or just try and make it as easy as possible. But I don't remember it being a big problem, really.
Big issue. No, I don't.
I don't. It's not something.
And what was it like for your father to return to the village that he'd been snatched from by the Soviets?
That was harder, wasn't it? I think, from what I recall, because again, his auntie, he did go back. His auntie was still alive, wasn't she? Who'd raised him.
Yeah.
And then he got another auntie who lived up near the cemetery. But I remember him going to his dad's grave.
Yeah.
And that was probably hard, because I can't hardly ever recall my dad crying, but he did that day.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I can see the street now. There's rowan trees all the way up this street. And Auntie Orniskova lived on the right-hand side, little way before the cemetery. You had to go over a railway bridge, so sometimes you had to wait for the trains to go before you could go over. And right at the top, they took him, because this was a wooden cross and it had rotted at the base.
Yeah.
And my dad was there, and I went and picked flowers. I think we went to pick some flowers, and my dad put this cross back straight on the grave. And that's the thing I remember that stands out the most, I think. That and sitting on the picking cherries out of the cherry tree in the garden where we were staying.
I think he also showed quite a lot of emotion when he learnt about his brother, because we were all sitting around the table and we didn't know why he was upset. And then he explained that Yanka had told him. She said that she couldn't write a letter to tell him what had happened because her tears washed away the words.
Yeah, that was his youngest brother, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Because he had three, because
the clever one.
Tomek, he was the one that was shot. Then there was Stasik, who was the alcoholic, and then there's the other one that disappeared during the corn riots in Gdansk or Gdynia in the 60s, wasn't he? He was still alive, but then he was never seen.
He just went off the radar, never seen.
Yeah, don't know whatever happened to him. No, he was involved in those riots on the docks in the late 60s. So quite a history, really, there.
Yeah, but Dad, it was an amazing time, and as Sue said, we went back again, and Mum and Dad went back again. But there was nothing that was going to attract him to go back and live in Poland. His life had become settled here. That was where he was happy.
And was that even after Poland threw off communism and became a democracy? He still wasn't going to entertain staying and go.
No,
by that time he'd been in this country longer than he'd been in his own country, really. Yeah. He didn't have that affinity with. I think we've always had an affinity with what goes on in Poland and Polish people and our Polish relatives, but the country itself, he never had that affinity to go that made him feel he wanted to be there.
He kept very much up to date with the political situation. He wasn't an academic man by any means, but he was very knowledgeable. He read up on the politics, and he was very clued up and knowledgeable on world politics. And he read up a great deal about what was going on in Poland. He was very aware of changes and what was happening. Because when I was little, they used to talk between themselves, and these things came up about Reds. They used to say the Reds were under your bed. I used to check under my bed at night, thinking, who are these Reds that might come out? And when I was about 10, because the Poles would sit and talk and chat. And of course, I didn't know what communism meant.
How many times did those men fight that war, though? How many times the pub having coffees and whatever? Oh.
Yes, if we could have understood more Polish, we probably would have picked up more of how they felt and their experiences coming through the war. Because when they were together, that was when they all chatted.
Yeah.
But of course, we didn't understand the Polish. I think that was when it came out about difficult life had been, was when they all got together and all chatted.
A lot of arm waving, wouldn't there? And yeah.
Were any of the family involved in Solidarity, the free trade union movement?
Not as far as we know.
No. We did have it was Jurek, who was Dad's, we called him cousin, but he was relative.
It was a step relative, wasn't it? One of the closest.
A step relative. Him and his wife, Zitka, they weren't involved then, but when the Russians first started impounding the Poles, they were what they call the intelligentsia, and Zitka's parents were sent to camp, weren't they? Because they were educated, they were clever, they were
professors or
professors,
academics,
and they were treated dreadfully. And going off different little tale again, but Yorick, who was an amazing, gorgeous man, and his family, when Dad was dying, he made his way from Warsaw to Leek by
train, ferry and bus,
and actually got his way into Leek walking to where we lived, and he just made it for the day after Dad had died.
2 days after, I think.
2 days after, and we didn't know he was coming, did we? We didn't know. No,
well, we did, but we found out later on that he was on his way.
Yes,
But he stayed with my mum, didn't he?
Yeah. It was just incredible that he was
his way, because he didn't speak English or very little. He understood quite a bit, didn't he? But didn't speak it.
But didn't speak any. Yeah. So all these things made up just memories, really, mostly good memories, happy memories. And as Sue said before, Dad was he was a very contented man. Very much valued what he had. Didn't look for greater things. Yes, up to when he died, Mum looked after him, and he considered he'd had a good life. Certainly after he landed in Leek, anyway.
Linda, you married Phil in 1971.
I did, yeah.
And there's a few complications there, aren't there?
That's right. Yes, that's what happened. We got married in 1971 and went to live in married quarters in Melksham. Phil was based at RAF Lynham. Very different for me, moving away and living elsewhere. No phone and whatever. And then one evening, these two guys came that looked like something out of a spy film, with held their trilbies on and long coats, and sent me in another room and said they needed to speak to Phil. Oh. And then they were there for, I don't know how long, an hour perhaps, something like that. And then when they went, I asked Phil what it was about, and he said, I'm not supposed to tell you. You just got married and you've just been interviewed by these two. And it was investigating my dad and investigating the background, how many relatives were in Poland, my background, all the family. And we do know that they did contact Bolton's, where we're pretty sure where Dad worked. And it was on the basis that if Phil was involved in anything secretive in the Air Force, that pressure could be put on Dad's family in Poland for Phil to give them information. It seemed a bit like something so extreme, but obviously those things happened when you married a Polish girl, or a girl with a Polish name. So that was quite interesting.
That was your experience of the possible Reds under the bed.
The Reds under the bed, yes.
I was still laughing over your Reds under the bed story, actually, Linda. That's a brilliant one. But I can see how a kid would think that. Because you make those weird connections, don't you?
I know we'd just moved to the council house, which I'd be about 7. Yes, I'd probably be 7, 8 or 9, and listening to these conversations. Because we didn't have a television. We didn't have a car. Dad would sit and chat and tell. He did actually used to sit and tell us stories about being in Poland, and that how lucky we
skating on the
yes,
I skated the skates,
making skis out of 2 pieces of wood and skating and he'd done all of those things.
Did your dad live long enough to see Poland being a free country?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, 1993. May 1993 he died, yes. Yeah.
Because he must have thought that was never going to happen in his lifetime. But it must have been a huge surprise and an immense source of pride that they'd been able to throw off these shackles that had held them for so long.
It was, and it was also that there was a future to look forward to for. Unfortunately, we've lost touch with some of the cousins now in Poland, but they felt that they'd got then a better future to look forward to, and travel became much easier, because we did have a relative come over from Poland, one of my cousins, with her daughter. That would be 73, 74.
Yeah.
Because we were in Trowbridge.
Yeah.
But she had to have permission to travel, and Dad had to sponsor her because and she had to get permission from her ex-partner to bring the little girl over. And there was a lot of paperwork that had to be done, and then checked upon that she would go back, and she would go back on the right date. So that was difficult then. But later, of course, that all became much easier. So it did go back. I can't remember the last year that the last time when we all went back, wasn't
92.
it? Last time, 92. Yeah, but that he started to be poorly.
Yeah, that's when we went back in 94.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how much had Poland changed at that point from that first visit?
Oh, it was incredible.
You could just go to places, and it was all more cosmopolitan, I suppose the word is really, and you could freely walk around places that we couldn't freely walk around before. In fact, it was absolutely so pleasurable, wasn't it, to see the family and to go and see all these things openly and freely.
And sit out and have coffee.
Yeah,
and
sit out.
Which we didn't do. Yes, yeah. As Sue said, more of a cosmopolitan to see the old town starting after. Everybody sitting out, the restaurants, people eating out in restaurants.
However, our family found it very odd. Why would you go and buy a coffee in a cafe when you can make one at home? They were very uncomfortable with that culture, weren't they?
Yes,
some of them were that hadn't, like Yorick and Jika were okay because they were a little bit more into that way of life anyway. But our other cousins, it was like, oh, why would you do it? They were uncomfortable with it, weren't they? Whereas it was just something we did all the time.
Just one other little thing that springs to mind is which I know was noted in the story that we did, was the courtesy of the men, getting used to having your hand kissed every time everywhere you went. Very much still. And Dad dropped into it, didn't he?
Yes, yeah.
Straight away, meeting different members of the family.
I mean, it was for you, obviously. I was a child, so it didn't.
Yes, you were a child. Yes,
you were treated as an adult, weren't you? Really?
As an adult, and this courtesy of having to have back of your hand kissed when you met people. Yeah. And then the other funny story was that on the way there, or when we were planning to go, my dad said, if they ask where the wedding photographs are, tell them we've forgotten them, because he didn't tell them that they hadn't been married in church. They'd been married in a register office, so we were supposed to say that they'd forgotten the wedding photographs. Although none of them were practicing Catholics, were they?
No, really. No. That was more my dad's anxiety than their issue, I think, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yes, yeah.
Brilliant.
It's interesting. Our families are all very interested in the history. Our children, Sue's children, grandchildren are all, because my mum's amazing at 94, and they love being with Gigi, great grandma, and she's told them all about the history. And she's written my dad's history and given them all a copy.
Got a copy of a book, pamphlet that she wrote.
Yeah, she's.
It's really good that it's being passed down. That the memory of your heritage there.
One of my youngest twin grandsons is considering, off his own bat, of adding our dad's name, our family name, to his name when he's old enough to add Jablonski to his name. Whether he will do that formally, I don't know, or whether he will just call himself that, but he said he would love to be able to carry on the name. He's 9 at the moment, going on 27. But he said my son was talking to him about losing the name is lost, really, so to speak, and wanted to know why and how that could change. And he said he's seriously considering when he's older adding the family name, which I said you can call yourself what you want. Legally, you have to have legal names, but you call yourself what you want.
And our youngest son, who isn't that young anymore, he's only got one tattoo that isn't really shown, and it's the Polish eagle. They were all very close to Grandpa. He's their hero, wasn't he, my dad? Yeah. Quiet, because he could arm wrestle anybody, and he could he'd always up for a challenge. Like Sue said before, he was small, but by gosh, he was strong.
It's been lovely hearing your memories of your father and the rest of your family as well. I feel very honoured to have been able to listen to that.
Additional thanks to Stefan Hales Józefczyk and the Leek Polish Connection for welcoming me into their group and allowing me to record this story.
Want to learn more about this episode? Don't miss the extras such as curated videos, photos and other content. Just look for the link in the episode information. Special thanks to the generous efforts of our financial supporters who keep the show on the air. If you'd like to join this select band, go to coldwarconversations.com/donate. The Cold War conversation continues in our Facebook discussion group. Just search for Cold War Conversations on Facebook. Thanks very much for listening, and see you next week.